Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the LTA for the upper bracket finals. Here for game number 3, we have a very special guest for the draft. Please welcome LS joining us on this one to break down some of what we've been seeing in the picks and the bans and how this series is going so far.
I am curious to see what's going to end up happening in game number 3 because I felt like C9 were set up for success in game number 2, and then they failed to close that. Game 1 was a complete disaster. I don't know what
they were not set up for
they're even
success,
trying to do in that. That's a very difficult game to play pretty much across the board and just poor utilization, right, of the draft. So now as we move into game 3, especially with where their mentals are at, what are they even going to attempt to go for? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I mean, that game number 2 ending, you're pushing in the enemy base. It looks like you should have all the tools that you need to win the game. You're at the Nexus turrets. The clock says 27 minutes. Right. Before the clock hits 30, you've lost the game. That is a really rough situation to bounce back from just 15 minutes later.
Especially for top lane. I really liked how Bwipo has approached it so far in game number 1 and game number 2. So let's get right into the draft, because this should be a fun one. Even though we are only 3 games into Fearless, there will be some interesting changes. You can't see it on screen quite yet, but you did see there FlyQuest going over some spreadsheets they've got for themselves for these drafts, and here we go. There's all the Fearless bans.
And for me, Fly ending up on red, this is what they want to be on anyway, typically, right? So this is, I mean, C9 also likely want to be on blue themselves, but I think that Fly are just going to utilize now the remaining games of Fearless a lot better on red side for the counter picks and everything. So
yeah,
let's see what they open.
I mean, both games so far, we've seen Bwipo take very specific counter picks into the top lane matchups that he's playing. And then in game number 1, when C9 is on red side, they counter pick themselves, and it doesn't work out. You already talked about how the draft just felt like a bit of a mess from C9 in that one.
Azir is looking up, though.
So yeah, we're already through the first half of the bans. It's Nico, Rumble, and Ahri banned out by C9. FlyQuest getting rid of Yone and Vi and Misfortune. What does C9 want to go with first? I want to see a really solid, coherent draft from them this game.
And just like you mentioned, Azir being hovered right now. Now, Fly, one of the teams that does have Azir counter picks inside of their pool. Obviously, one of the lesser common ones that's fallen off, like Xerath, is something that could be available for them to go with. Obviously, I have the Kai'Sa hover by Bwipo. Nothing too surprising there.
That's just a given.
Yeah.
So many players have all of their hover shoutouts. But what are you really thinking from the FlyQuest side? Because generally, when the players talk about Cloud9, they're like, Cloud9, they're fairly standard, and so they do come a bit easier to predict. And there we go. I guess not a lot of thought into it, but the Taliyah has always been a prominent pick into the Azir.
So I wonder if the Taliyah into the Azir here, again, it's a vacuum answer historically. It's also potentially good in team fights. Azir, very prone and weak to artillery, long-range team compositions. There's the Ezreal to complement that. We did have the Nidalee hovers. I wonder if Bwipo is actually pondering just trying to neutralize Thanatos in laning phase, because really, the way the series is looking, he might kind of be their only hope if he really turns up in a game, but I don't know if that's going to be the direction, as Renekton stolen away from Bwipo.
Yeah, we've got the Renekton locked in for the top lane. How do we feel about the Trundle, second pick overall in the draft for C9 here?
Trundle really odd to me because it doesn't really match that well up into Ezreal, and I don't think it's really doing that much inside of the draft. You're going to give counterpick jungle over to Inspired, which does just surprise me. The one thing the Trundle does do is it prevents things like Malphite or these other big tanks from coming in to try to just respond to the Renekton and then play like a longer controlled game with the Ezreal Taliyah.
Yeah, it is a little like risky doing it before there's a tank showing. And like you said, with the Renekton very early too, we already got the answers here. Bwipo was an early adopter of the Nidalee top.
Right. The Nidalee, for me, it just seems like the clear pick here. The Trundle thing, it does now being removed in this game 3. If Fearless does go to game 4 and 5, tanks become a little bit more potent. Nidalee just seems like the obvious answer because she's not as vulnerable to Trundle as other top lane picks. And now Thanatos will be neutralized and he will be bullied in this matchup. Things are looking a little rough, and if you're C9 as we move into the second ban phase, what can you even really hope to do at this point? Because jungle pool is so wide open still, and then support pool, you're just going to get counterpicked.
Yeah, and like, did you throw protection bans, for jungle? I feel like that's just throwing stuff into a bottomless pit here versus Inspired.
I don't really know what C9 can hope to do. The Karma ban comes in pretty standard against the Ezreal, but the thing is, the artillery is there even with the Nidalee, right? You have the Taliyah, you have the Ezreal, you have the Nidalee. C9 they're very short range right now. They're going to be playing like a ball comp, right? They're going to hold their phalanx and stuff, but that doesn't matter when you're getting hit by a rain of arrows. So C9, in their remaining picks, they need something really big to turn up that can match these types of champions. And I don't think that they're going to go for things like Jinx or these other types of hyper carries. I just don't expect to find that for them.
They're going to have to dig deep here. First, a couple of extra support bands, though, to come out. Anything else here they're super worried about? I guess the Braum, so they can open up some of those melee supports.
The Braum ban does make me think that they are worried about the thing that we were just talking about, where they can't really get the engage off because they're just so bally. And so that ban is nice. I'd like to see a jungler here for Inspired, because you do just want to get the counter pick in the support to guarantee. And the support counter pick pinches what options C9 would have for any hypers. The Poppy's really interesting because it's a dual flex.
Dual flex and very good into the Azir, plus can block Renekton.
Exactly. The ability of the Steadfast Presence to really shut down some of the playmaking for both of these solo laners that we're seeing so far from C9, also really kind of putting a chokehold on what could still be picked for that support position to try to deal with it, to be that engage that C9 needs. Since what you've already been talking about, LS, FlyQuest is happy to just hang back, fling projectiles all day. C9 needs some way to get in there and stop them.
Right, and the other really cool thing about Poppy, if she does elect to go into the jungle here, she's not as punished as a traditional top lane Poppy, because she's not getting as much as a top lane Poppy would in terms of resists. So Trundle doesn't get as much value, but Poppy's turning up big here. Azir, Renekton, both here, pinches support picks that are potentially possible. And now you just get Kai'Sa Nautilus, and it's like, what are these two champions doing together? Because you're trying to run into things that don't really create windows or opportunities for you. And it looks like Aleona is going to be the hover Bard now.
So it sounds like you're pretty FlyQuest sided on the evaluation of who's winning these drafts.
This is a very sinful draft.
How do you lay it out as far as early game steps into the mid game here?
So the really confusing thing is you just have three really good lanes right now for Fly. You have Renekton, who's going to be suffering by himself. Trundle has to play really sinful this game. He has to take risks, has to do variance-based things, because Taliyah vacuum answers the Azir. Nidalee vacuum answers the Renekton. But then you have the theme of the artillery from FlyQuest, which just scales really well. And now Bard, he's been getting a lot of popularity all over the world, solo queue and competitive. And this champion just plays magnificently here. I don't know what the Kai'Sa and Not is even here for. I actually just think they're panicked and they just locked in two random things.
Okay, well, chatters for Cloud9, get to pray in here for them, because these are must-win games from here on out.
Yes, sir. Now, remember, they won't be eliminated if they lose here today. They will, however, move into the lower bracket. Today's winner guarantees you a spot in those finals for all of Split 2 next weekend, and a shot at some international competition after that. We'll see the coaches go in for one last fist bump here. LS, as we're just about to wrap up draft, if you are C9, what is the game plan in this one? What do you think is most imperative for them to bring us to a game 4?
A lot of things have to go well for Blabber early on. He needs to create high variance situations. They need to come out on top.
All right, LS, thank you so much for all of your knowledge, all of your insight into the draft here. We appreciate you lending that brain power to us. Non-subscribers, we'll see you guys in 30 seconds. For everybody else, C9's backs are against the wall. These guys have got to figure out how to deal with a FlyQuest team that it looks like they should have beat in Game 2, but FlyQuest, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
All right, thank you, LS. We'll let you get back to your co-stream that you got going on and dive into this game number 3. Yeah, let's see, because people have